Good afternoon. As you can see, my name is Emma Pece. I'm 19 years old and I'm studying international relations in Milan. I'm very honored to be here and to introduce this strategic topic that has had a strong impact on me as I had the opportunity to live an amazing and yet shocking experience in a local orphanage thanks to Fondazione Francesca Rava. During 3 consecutive summer breaks, I joined an expedition as a volunteer in the Dominican Republic where I was able to witness firsthand the relationship between food, nutrition, and health. I was emotionally touched by the profound difference between the children living in the orphanage, so supported by Fondazione Rava, and the children living in the slums. Here, the shortage of food, the lack of variety, and the no balanced food were evident. These children were malnourished, very underweight, thin, and unhealthy. This is my call for action, to invest in researches and innovations which guarantee food access and a correct nutrition to people that cannot afford it. Thank you very much.
Not yet. No.
My name is Francesco. Okay, now you do. I'm a partner of Deloitte here in Milan, so welcome also to my city, Milan. I'm very pleased to introduce this conference. Only a brief message from me, and then I will leave you to the real speakers. The consumer equation has been really disrupted over the last years, as you all know. So along with the usual values for consumers, such as cost and convenience and the other values, today our consumers are always more attracted to values such as the health and wellness, social impact, and experience and other new. So the equation of consumers has been really disrupted, and we are here to understand which part of the equation can be managed differently as before. Because talking about health and wellness, nutrition is a great part of it, and new technologies are has to be taken into account when understanding these changes. We at Deloitte have a privileged position with our more than 250,000 people all over the world and in 150 countries to work with pharmaceutical companies in the life sciences and also in the food sector. So we understand the importance of addressing challenges coming from different sectors that are blurring every day more than in the past. The other thing that I wanted to tell you is that we understand the importance of the disruption of the value, and so we wanted to support this discussion, and we wanted to understand what is the sustainability of the new nutrition. So is the new technology, as the quantified self, the data insights, and so forth, can be really impactful to everyday life and change in a positive way the value of the citizens and consumers? The answer could be yes, of course, if managed correctly. And then, if managed correctly, could be really impactful not only for the generation, but also for the generations to come. So thank you and enjoy the discussion.
everyone. Good afternoon. And today I'm here to really tell you something that we call in my lab the dark matter of nutrition. And what do we mean, actually, and how do we arrive to that concept to begin with? Well, I'm a network scientist, and I spend much of my time, actually, at the Harvard Medical School position looking at this network. This is the network of proteins within your cells, how they connect to each other, how they interact with each other. Why is that important? Because mutations and other defects in our cells disrupt this network, and the disruption of the network is something that we perceive as a disease. Now, of course, I spent kind of the last 10 years looking at this network that comes typically from genetic data, and the more we study, the more dissatisfied we are with the knowledge that comes from it. Because it turns out that genetic effects can only explain about 10 to 30% of the disease sources. And we kept wondering, where is the rest? Where is the rest of the stuff coming from? Why do we get sick? And obviously, the answer in this room is pretty clear. We get sick because there are very strong environmental effects, and the biggest elephant in the room really is the food. That is the way we eat and the way we're actually exposed to nature. And I like this plot because it actually shows how different around the United States are the coronary heart disease incidences. The dark regions where you have lots of people actually sick with coronary heart disease, the white regions where a much fewer fraction of the population is. And US has more or less a common genetic background. So you cannot explain by genetics the fact that in the South you have far more disease incidence than you have in other parts of the country. And there's lots of other evidence that tells us that really food affects our health in an incredible manner. But how does it do it? And that's actually many of my colleagues who studied the chemistry of how food affects health tell us. And this is my favorite example. This is one way that actually meat affects your health. Meat has several molecules in it, like L-carnitine and chlorine and others, that are processed by the gut bacteria and I turn into TMAO. And once you have those people who have elevated TMAO level in their blood, they are 40% more likely to die of coronary heart disease than those who actually don't have an elevated level. So somehow we think that these particular chemicals that are the source of TMAO are partly responsible of why occasionally meat is unhealthy for us. But interestingly, we're in Italy, and the Mediterranean diet actually doesn't have a problem with meat. You know, it's part of the diet. So the question, why is that possible? Well, because it pairs meat with allicin and other, with garlic and olive oil that have inside allicin, and allicin actually blocks the gut bacteria's ability to create TMAO. Now, as beautiful as the science behind this pathway is, the reason I like to show you is not to actually teach you more chemistry, but to tell you that we understand what chemicals are involved in the process, but yet you will not be able to find out if these chemicals are in your food. If you look at the food tables that the USDA provides us in the United States and the equivalent agencies around Europe, you will find only one chemical listed there. The rest are simply not even mentioned. And when we looked much deeper, we realized that really all our knowledge about what the food is made of, it's really limited to 150 nutritional components. These are very important for us because these are what we need to survive. We must actually have these nutritional components on a regular basis. For example, garlic has 67 of these nutritional components in it. Yet, when you look at the chemical composition of the food, it turns out that there are more than 28,000 different molecules in the food. These are not materials added during food processes. These are naturally actually part of the food composition. And when you look even more carefully, you realize that many of these molecules that we do not track in our food, because we only track the nutritional components, have multiple health effects. They have antibiotic effects like allicin does, and they affect coronary heart disease and many other things. So we started systematically looking at it, and what we realized that really what we track in the food is really just 0.5% of the food composition. And the rest, of course, depending on 17,000 or 28,000, depending on how you count, are what we call the nutritional dark matter. Why does it matter? It matters because it turns out that 67% of the health effects that we have for food that is documented in biology are coming from the nutritional dark matter. So it's totally, and these are the molecules that it's very, very difficult to find out in what food you contain and what is really what you eat, how many of these molecules you get. So therefore, we started the project Foodome in my lab in collaboration with many others. And what our dream would be down the line is to be able to break the food in its ultimate chemical composition. We call it the chemical barcode, to really be able to track what are the precise list of chemicals and quantities of those chemicals that reach our body. Because if we get the barcode at an individual level, we could correlate that with your genome as well as your disease history and try to understand how the food, together with what you inherited your parents, your gene, together lead actually to diseases or in some cases to wellness. This is a very complicated process, so I don't want to actually make it look too easy, because you have to start from the dishes we eat, right? And there are about 1 million dishes that humans consume in general, and you have to break it into the ingredients, each dish. And now you have to find out in the ingredients like onion, what are the precise set of chemicals in there, and then how do these chemicals connect to your genome as well as to your metabolome, to metabolism, and eventually how they lead to diseases. And the complexity of the problem is mind-boggling. But we live actually in an era where just about everything is tracked about us, so it's not unfeasible for us to be able to detect this information and put this information together. And why is it important to do so? One of the reasons why it's important to do so is because this information is really absolutely necessary for us to really understand first what's in the food. And let me show you an example that we have already done in this context. So this is wheat basil, right? We all like that. It has about 2,000 different chemical compounds, of which only 156 are quantified, and the rest we don't know how much is it in there. Some of these chemicals provide the flavor, the taste of it, and others actually connect to different proteins in our cells, and they affect certain diseases, sometimes in a beneficial way and sometimes in a negative way. We would love to obtain that type of detailed description for every single food that we eat, every single ingredient. That would be the ultimate goal. We're not there. But why is it important to do so, and what could we do if we achieve that? We are currently, to achieve this, we're collecting all the information that researchers have ever collected about food. This is what we call knowledge graph, how it connects to our genes, to molecules, and so on. We're mining information about the ingredients of garlic or the ingredients of basil. We're thinking of food as drug, trying to figure out what molecules they affect and how they involve in disease. We're exploring food and drug interactions, trying to figure out what foods actually benefit you when you take a drug, and what are the foods that you shouldn't take together with the drugs. And eventually the goal is to connect what we call network medicine, that is to really kind of understand how the molecules affect each of your health. At Harvard Medical School, I helped fund a division of network medicine that has more than 300 researchers working on that. They're all looking at the cellular network that I showed you earlier. We would like to add the food as a component to that picture. And one of the reasons this is important is because when we're born with certain genomic defects. And for the time being, we cannot change that. If you find out in your sequencing that you have some mutations that predispose to a disease, there's not much you can do against that. You can talk to your parents where they messed it up, but you were born with that, you're going to live with that. However, we can manipulate the network and its activity through the food, because the network within the cell is inert unless we feed it. So the idea is that only through food we can really induce change in the way our cells work. And the challenge of this research actually for us is to figure out how to do that. What molecules play a role, what don't matter, and how they really work together. This is a big effort, and many, many people in my lab and other labs are working on it. I just want to emphasize that Peter Rupert is going to be here for the next 3 days. He can answer many questions, and thank you very much for your attention.
Hello, good afternoon, everybody. Very nice to be with you this afternoon. A big thank to the organization, Seeds&Chips, to welcome me here and to give me the opportunity to share a few slides and thoughts with you on what we do at Nestlé in the context of the health of the individuals. And myself, so my name is Henri-Pierre Lenoble. I'm heading a global project at Nestlé related to the health of the child. So the angle I will take today is a bit more on the child dimension, the health of the child. So the project is called Nestlé for Healthier Kids. And we have three main actions related to this, and that's the one I will share very shortly with you in these 10 short minutes on this. One is to make sure that we understand the needs and the gaps of the child when it comes to nutrition. So that's the first priority. And of course, when you know this well, you can impact the portfolio, the products, and the services you bring to especially to the caregivers, to the parents. And that's something which is extremely important, because when we talk about personalized nutrition or targeted nutrition or relevant nutrition to a certain individual, you need exactly to understand what is the needs, where they stand today in terms of nutrition. So that's coming. So what I mentioned, the first priority is to identify the unmet needs of children around the world. So we're a big company. We are selling products all over the world. So I think it's around 190 countries where we operate with this company. We are the first food company in the world. And we do what we call nutritional landscaping in all these countries. So we really want to know exactly, again, what are the needs, what are the gaps, what is the situation from a nutrition point of view of these children. And especially, we do deep dive studies, and you have some markets where we do the deep dive studies here, where we really understand not only the dietary intakes of the child, but also everything which is related to the life of the child. So what are the food occasions they are running through the day? What are the snacking opportunities? What is the family situation in terms of feeding practices, in terms of also the socio-economical level. So these are elements that are important to understand, really to make a positive impact on the health of the child. Because you know very well, nutrition is not only about food and products, but it's also about lifestyle and behaviors. Even to the point of the sleeping time, or sport, of course. All these things are having an impact on the health of the child. So that's the type of things we understand when we operate in these countries. And I've selected just top lines, but these are just few examples of data that we collect in these studies. And actually, the studies, for example, in Mexico and in the US, our results are incorporated into the feeding guidelines in these countries. So this is something where we have very, very robust and detailed results from this. So for example, in the US, 16% of the children 9 to 13 years old are skipping lunch. That was data in 2016, actually, this one. So this is important to understand, again, to know what is the situation, where do you bring. And very linked to this, you have fiber intake. Again, few examples here below the recommendations. In Australia and Mexico by 1 gram below in average, in Brazil by 5 grams, but also very much in the US by 11 to 12 grams. So fibers, missing fibers, there is no rocket science. When we don't eat enough vegetables, healthy grains, very likely your fiber intake is going to be lower than the recommendation. So that's the type, again, of results we get. 75% of Chinese children falling short on vegetable recommendations in average, even higher in the cities like Shanghai or Beijing. 80 to 97% of Brazilian, Filipino, Russian, and Chinese children consuming too little calcium. And last example, sweetened beverages being the top source of added sugars in the diet across many countries, followed by grain products and desserts. So that's the kind of, again, of data and learnings we get. The main use of this, as I mentioned, is what I will share after, is to influence the portfolio. So what do we do on the products? And what do we do also on services, on the tips we give, the guidance we give to the parents to get the right nutrition for the child. So I'll just share very few examples. First of all, maybe just one point here, a bit of theory. We talk about personalized nutrition, but actually there are, I would say, two angles in the spectrum, and this is not that separated, and it's overlapping a lot. But actually, you can talk very much about answering the individual needs of a certain person. And I'm thinking here even more when you have, for example, intolerance like lactose intolerance, when you have even up to a disease like Crohn's disease. So this is something from a very individual point of view you need to understand to make sure that you deliver the right solutions from a product, but also from a service point of view to this person and to this child in the context of this project. So that's one side of the angle, the individual needs. But on the other side, everything we do must have an impact from a public health point of view. So the nutritional situation, when we talk about reducing sugar, increasing grains and fibers, this is going to have an impact from a mass point of view, from a public health point of view. And of course, this is also touching individuals, but we look at this very much from a public health point of view. And again, being a big company, we sell, I think, something like more than 1 billion products per day. So anything we do on mass products is likely to have an impact, and we're trying to make a positive impact by renovating and innovating with our products at Nestlé. So this is the theory. Now, few examples from a portfolio point of view, and these are just few examples. I mean, we have a big range of products at Nestlé, so I've selected some of them that we've launched recently. This is a milk solution in some countries for Latin America. It's called Nestlé Nido 40 Grow, and this is a solution for lactose intolerance. So I would say that's a bit more into the individual needs. It's a zero lactose product. You have some baby food for toddlers, healthy snacks, where we boost the grains and the fiber content in this product. So it's made with, it's not written here, but it has lentils, it has chia seeds, sorghum, yellow green peas. So there are a lot of things that we put in these snacks. It's unsalted, it's popped, so not fried. So this is bringing additional values in terms of fibers, but also I think vitamin E is inside. Another example, it's not a bit sensitive. Knowing that a lot of kids are skipping breakfast, we have an RTD solution ready-to-drink solution for breakfast on the go with essential nutrients for breakfast. Again, having calcium, vitamins, and minerals. This is launched in Latin America. One or two more examples. That's from Italy. I have my Italian colleagues today in the room. No rocket science. Going sugar reduction is, again, a way to have a personalized nutrition for the mass. Because we know very much, and that's all the data are saying, we are having too much sugar. So having a product containing sugar, which is reduced like 30% here. We also just launched in Europe Nesquik All Natural, which is not claiming sugar reduction, but actually is reduced in sugar. And also less dense. So when you take 1 spoon, you have again less sugar in the final portion. So it's around 50% in the portion in a paper bag. So we're also touching the sustainability dimension with this, with all natural ingredients. Baked noodles in India. So replacing the fried noodles by baked noodles with inclusion of vegetables. And another example. This is in Poland, where we have grain-based type of meals, a type of risotto for the Italian, I guess you know, but we call it casciotto in Poland with grains and vegetables. So these are few solutions in our portfolio targeted to kids and families where we apply the knowledge we have in terms of nutritional gaps and needs, and we are pushing this portfolio. All this is supported by commitments we've made publicly at Nestlé. The main ones are around sugar reduction, salt reduction, fibers from grains, and vegetables also. We've committed to have a certain number of portions that we are adding to our products. Last but not least, I mentioned product, mentioned services now. This is very interesting. We've just launched this in India. It's the first artificial intelligence that we are using in this big market, this big country. The artificial intelligence assistant is called Nina. It enables voice conversation, so you can call Nina and get some advice on nutrition. And this is dedicated to the parents to help them to have the right nutrition for the child. So it's it has been developed in collaboration with Google, and we just launched this in India. And you can have a customized meal plans, especially if you have your kids have food allergies. If you have also food preferences, you can customize it. You can have a growth tracker, so knowing where your child is in his growth. You have a food diary with a nutritional score, so again, you know what is the quality of your daily nutrition. You have recipes, very simple, giving healthy recipes for the parents to get them to have good nutrition for the child. So that's, for me, going even more in the dimension of personalized and targeted nutrition by helping with the voice assistant, with the new technologies, to have the right answers for the parents. And you're going to expect much more than this one. This is just one example, but we are rolling out these kind of solutions now in the countries in Nestlé. Here it is. Thanks a lot. Thank you. I think the time is over. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Thank you to Seeds&Chips for having me here, and thank you for all you wonderful people to come here to listen to these great speakers, and then there's me. I'm Lone Ryolsen. I'm from the Danish Food Cluster. It's an industry-driven organization of big and small companies and universities as well. I'm here to say something about how we can better nutrition through collaboration. But let me start with telling you a story of the good old days in Denmark. This is a picture of how many people like to perceive life back in the times where the sun was always shining, the farmer was happy, the animals were happy, the food were better. Shouldn't we all go back to those golden days and live a more healthy life? Well, another part of the story of the good old times, at least in Denmark, is a very tough life. In Denmark, many families lived very close to starvation. The average lifespan was about 45 years. Today it's more close to 85. People were a lot shorter than they are today. And the population in Denmark was about 40% of what we see today. This came from bad nutrition. This came from having a very not varied diet and also having too little to eat. But then something happened. Farmers in Denmark and many other places around the world started to join together in cooperatives, saying that together we can do something more than we can on our own. They partnered up with scientists, starting to improve their products, having better nutritional value, less contamination, and also higher market value, making life as a farmer easier. And the result is this. As you probably know, Lurpak butter, one of the best-known butter brands in the world, and that's actually only a little part of the story of the Danish food cluster. Because this is a story of a country where people lived near starvation, and today we're producing 3-4 times as much food as we can eat ourselves. And it's not just a story about butter. It's also a story about ingredients, about the companies such as DuPont, Christian Hansen, Novozymes, delivering ingredients all over the world to alternative solutions. It's also a matter of organics. Denmark is the country in the world where the largest part of the food that is sold is organic. It's a matter of sustainable farming. Danish farmers today pride themselves in having the most sustainable ways of farming in the world. So I don't know how old you guys are in the audience. Maybe you are too young to recognize this fella. It's Michael Douglas from a movie called Wall Street. He was the evil capitalist saying that greed is good, greed works. Well, in Denmark, we learned to say that collaboration is good because collaboration works. So it's not really a matter of people in Denmark being especially nice and collaborative. You have to remember, Danes are also Vikings. and very harsh traders. So it's not really a matter of niceness, it's a matter of business. It's a matter of this pays off, this works. And it is this understanding in Denmark that has created something very special, something that I think we can all benefit from here today. I think many of you are here because you believe in collaboration, and you believe that together we can create much more than we can on our own. So what is the Danish Food Cluster today? What does it look like? Well, we are really big in some of the old stuff, the dairy and the meat, but we're also growing really big in a lot of other areas. We are frontrunners within insect innovation. We are frontrunners within stop food waste. We do a lot within hemp production. And as I mentioned before, the ingredient companies in Denmark are delivering the ingredients needed to create food innovation all over the world. Actually, if you look at enzymes for dairy production, but also dairy alternatives, Christian Hansen, a little north of Copenhagen, is the largest in the world. If you look at how do you create natural coloring, well, you have DuPont that have their largest food and beverage research center in Aarhus, very close to where my offices are. So Denmark is today a lot more than just pork and unpack butter. And this is only possible because we had to work together. This is only possible because we had to work together. So just like everybody here in this room are concerned with where the food challenges of the world, all of us realizing that we need new answers, maybe there's some learning in that, in how we have, in a very small country such as Denmark, very limited natural resources, very high salaries, had to find a new way of doing things, and collaboration has been key. And today, I'm here to ask to all of you to join that movement, to join a global food alliance for us together to create something more than we can on our own. Maybe some of you have partners in other countries. Maybe some of you would like to have more. If that is so, please let me know, and I would like to include you. And if you like to connect with this Global Food Alliance and all the stuff going on in Denmark, please join us. We are hosting a food week in Denmark in the beginning of September. There's a lot of great events going on. There's a food festival. That's the greatest in the Nordics. There's EIT Food Prize. That is the first food prize from EIT taking place in Denmark. And there's European Food Venture Forum. So if you're a startup, if you're a corporate, if you're a scientist who are curious about what's going on and how can I join this, this is an opportunity for you. So with these words, thank you very much for your time and your patience, and have a great collaborative time here at Seeds&Chips.
In French is sweet. Matok in Hebrew is sweet. Do in Hebrew is double. So sweet, sweet, or double sweet, that's what we do at Do Matok. We've developed a platform for improved flavor delivery that takes little flavor and makes it taste like much. So little sugar tastes like a lot of sugar. I propose in this very disruptive meeting to start with no disruption. And we'll revisit those two words towards the end. We like our indulgences. We need our indulgences. They make us happy. However, if we overdo it, we pay a price. So you don't want to overdo indulgences. The problem of sugar consumption is huge. It's worldwide. Most of us, consume more than the double of the recommended amount of added sugar per day. This leads to obesity, diabetes, heart conditions, human suffering, and huge costs. But don't let people fool you. Sugar is not the new tobacco. Nature strives on sugar. The plant, the animal, we do. Energy. Tobacco, only one thing strives on tobacco, and that is cancer. Sugar is happiness for many people. Deprive people of sugar, and you will need to give them antidepressants. That's Warren Buffett. When people walk to the shelf, their first consideration in all statistics is taste. The second is price. And only the third comes health. We at Dumatok found a way to make sugar reduction that is sugar-based. So we are the same sugar quality, sugar taste, but with 40% less sugar. And it's the same indulgence. How do we do it? When you take a bite into a cake, over 80% of the sugar in the cake will never see a receptor. Only 20% or less will ever get to a receptor. The 80% goes directly where you don't want it, your digestive system. What we do is we take fiber or mineral and we load it with sugar molecules, creating clusters of sweetness. So when you take a bite from a cake with a Dumatok sugar inside, first those clusters get into your oral cavity, then the saliva layer, and then they keep pumping sugar into the receptors. But there is a second mode of action which is not less interesting. The carriers, the fibers or minerals that we use, are also mucoadhesive. They stick to the muco. And as such, they stay by the receptors longer. And they keep pumping those sugars, making the Dumatok sugars very full. And you don't immediately reach for the next bite. If I had one slide to show you, I would show this one. On the left side, you see a butter biscuit EIT project that we did with Givaudan, Puratos, Strauss, University of Reading. Not only the 120 mothers to children 4 to 12 that tasted those biscuits found the Dumatok 40% reduced as sweet, but to our surprise, they preferred more than the double in blind tasting the Dumatok version, 40% of the sugar reduced and preferred. And in intention to purchase, it was 3 times. in favor of the Dumatok. And on the right side, you can see a hazelnut spread, this time youngsters 13 to 18, 120 blind tasting, Nutella type spread, and again, the Dumatok wins in preference. How do we do it? It's a combination of material science. One of the carriers we use, 1 gram of that carrier has the surface of 300 square meters. 1 gram, 300 square meters. That's material science. To that, we add green chemistry. No new molecules, no funny processes, green chemistry, hydrogen bonds. To that, we add food technology, because in every matrix, it plays a little different. And finally, pharmacology, which is what helps us keep the sugar longer by the receptors. The pull from the industry is huge. For every kilogram that we made until we started going industrial, there were at least 100 hands stretched. But we are good in a limited number of products. We haven't tested it all around because sugar is everywhere. We are good in chocolates and good in spreads. We are great in baked goods, cereal bars, gummies, hard candies. Those are the fields or the applications we've tested so far. Südzucker, our European sugar partner, has made it public last week that they started running the first commercial production line of Dumatok sugars. So in the coming weeks, there will be Dumatok sugar for partners. I want to take you back to where I started. No disruption. We don't want to disrupt the child that wants his candy. But if you can achieve it, improve his nutrition, reduce his sugar, this, no disruption. Isn't it disruptive? Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for the opportunity to tell you about our startup. We are called A1C, but in the process of growing up, we changed to Eat Sane, so you might be a little bit confused. A1C is the average blood glucose for the last 3 months of a diabetic. So that was targeted very much towards diabetes, and people said that wasn't such a good idea, that a lot of people could benefit from what we're doing, so we are now in the process of changing the name. So I love low-carb food, said no one ever. But something is wrong, and I've been seeing this process for the last 20 years as a doctor. As you just heard, we have a real issue here. 30% of the world population is obese. 422 million people have diabetes. Another 450 million people have prediabetes. 1 of 10 people are sick, and in 10 years, 1 of 3 will be sick. And that's pretty much insane, because this is something that is relatively new. There was no diabetes 100 years ago. And despite all the technological progress, the number of chronic diseases is just growing, not declining. So something has got to change. And the thing is that people are really confused. The more problems we have, the more confusion people feel, because all these no's are thrown at us. no sugar, no dairy, no fats, no meats, no nuts. What do? It's clear, though, that something does have to change. But what we do know is that the root cause of chronic disease is inflammation, and that in order to reduce the inflammation, people need to dramatically lower their excessive consumption of carbohydrates. This is not the only thing we need to do, but a major thing. Now, in the 1980s came out the first time that we saw the food pyramid, where the bottom of the food pyramid, the base of it, is all carbs. And this, unfortunately, was not based on science. This was a bit of a social experiment that has really led us awry in the wrong direction. And since then, now we have actually surpassed 40% of Americans are obese. This is insane. So the problem is that when you tell people to lower their carbs, as you just heard, or their sugar, they don't want to. We live in a world that's addicted to the sweet taste of sweetness. Now, the majority of the solution from the food industry is to use artificial sweeteners. But among the disadvantages is that these artificial sweeteners make us want more sweet. They keep us addicted to sweet. And this is why we can't conceive changing this. To me, artificial sweeteners are insane. And people are fed up with artificial sweeteners. In fact, 53% of global consumers try to avoid artificial sweeteners versus 34% who try to avoid sugar. So consumers are demanding sanity. And we believe that it's actually our responsibility to decrease this addiction to food that it tastes sweet. So a few words about myself. My father has type 1 diabetes, and I've been treating diabetes for 20 years, actually, by now, not 18, 20. And my co-founder has a daughter with diabetes, and we sort of joined forces because when I prescribe a very low carbohydrate diet that actually is able to reverse diabetes, what I find is that it's hard for people to do this. So I'm looking for solutions to make this more feasible, more sustainable. And this is how it started. Actually, it started in my kitchen. And eventually, we developed a patent-pending food matrix that allows for low glycemic index food without the use of artificial sweeteners. But because we do actually use a little bit of real sugar, we're actually keeping the taste great. So our mission is to make people favor low-carb food over high-carb food because of the taste. Now here's a graph where you see the bottom, we have a chocolate so far and bread, and you can see that there is no sugar rise in comparison to control, both actually in the diabetics and then the non-diabetic population. This is our bread. It has 2 grams of carbohydrate per slice instead of 15. It's like a cucumber. So it makes it possible to keep a very low-carb diet while still keeping the bread. So who will go insane for our brand? Well, the first tier, as I said, is diabetics. Patients with diabetes, basically I call it like an allergy to sugar. Diabetes is basically screaming, saying, please don't bring any more sugar into the body because there is no more room. And hence, lowering the sugars, now when I use sugars meaning carbs, although sugar in particular has its own behavior. So, but when I look at carbs in general, diabetics don't have room for that, and hence, they're really the first people to benefit from this. But second tier are, for example, people keeping the ketogenic diet, which is not only for various reasons people do this. It's now an extremely popular diet, particularly in the United States, with 5 million Google searches a month. In the ketogenic diet, you're aiming for 20 grams of carbs throughout the day in a very strict ketogenic diet. And given that the bread is only 2, for example, this makes it feasible. Weight loss, it's a complicated subject, but weight loss is not really about calories in, calories out. It's more dictated by insulin. Insulin is what sets our weight point. So if you want to make someone fat, you give them insulin or make them secrete a lot of insulin. If you want to make someone skinny, lower their insulin. And this is really the master hormone behind our weight. So when we eat carbs, this is the macronutrient that requires the most amount of insulin, hence keeping us gaining weight. Now also regulatory requirements and new labeling for food make our system attractive. So we have a team. My co-founder is outside. We have Jackie Khazan, who's a master chef and really an amazing magician in my mind. Nitzan, Shali Shalit, Nadav Burgers, who are our advisor, and Lisa Mann as well. So we're just at the beginning, but thank you very much for your attention. And
Under 30.
Four years ago, I had a eureka moment about my food intake. Alex, one of my best friends, told me my basic judgment about what healthy food is was wrong. At the time, we were very interested by the promises of a new product category launched by Soylent in 2013 in the US. A complete food, 100% daily value on all nutrients, scientifically formulated and ready to eat. Eating well is so complicated, and suddenly it looked so simple. But while analyzing all the available products in the US and Europe, Alex told me, these have the same problem. They optimize the basic nutritional values, those on the packaging, but in reality, I don't find those to be very healthy. I was very shocked. Why? It is scientifically formulated, the nutritional values look good. What's the problem? Well, you know, the reality is we don't know very precisely what we need to eat to be very healthy. It's complicated, way more than what's written on these nutrition labels. It is all sorts of small but important things. After many hours, the discussion went on to, if you think we can do it better, maybe we should give it a try. It's a very naive way to start a company. We had very little understanding of the reasons why there is such a distance between what science says and what consumers buy. We launched Vitalin with the initial insight that to give the best of ourselves, we have no choice but to eat well. That may seem a pretty obvious statement to people here in this room, but the facts are, distance is large between science and what's on our plates. Rather than being our best ally, food holds us back. So we crafted Vitalin's mission as the best of nutrition in simple formats. We wanted to bridge the gap between what the science says we should eat and our actual consumptions, the shelves. And we believe the biggest hurdle is the ease of consumption. Pretty much everybody knows what to eat when we have time to cook when we're at home. Now Vitalin is part of this new category of food conceived for nutritional performance and convenience. We are in the market with many competitors, some of those here today, and we work hard to challenge them on our nutritional quality. In details, we offer great nutritional values, great nutritional performance, many labels, but the most important feedback we get from our consumers is that they feel better when they eat Vitalin. Their overall energy level, their overall digestion, their overall feeling is better. We also have several products, we also have several product formats. Bar, bottle, pouch. Here is an example of our range of tastes. We also have ranges for daily nutrition, the average meals, which is organic, balanced, and our catalyst range, which is a functional food designed for specific usage and goals. But our most important differentiator is that we integrate under the same roof, in the same building, our development lab and our production line. We believe shortening the development cycle is key to bring innovation to market. Actually, that's how we can bring new products in less than 2 months between ideation and the hands of the first customer. We have a pretty developed pilot program that works pretty well. And for the small optimization on existing products, we do it in less than a week. Concerning the future of food, we believe that consumers are going to get more educated, that new labels are going to emerge. We think we're well prepared for that. And we believe going forward, we need to bridge the gap between what is desirable food, the health benefits, and the environmental impact. We have a great development pipeline, but for this, you could follow us on our social networks. I'd like to end with our key learnings, talking to some professionals of the food industry. What we learned in 3 lessons. It's the wrong presentation. Okay. Okay, it's definitely the wrong one. The first learning is you cannot sell food like a supplement. We began Vitaline with a very technical approach, and for a very small group of people, they look at Vitaline this way, in a technical approach. But for most people, food is a social moment. It's enjoyment. It brings pleasure to life. So even though labels, nutrients, sustainability of food are incredibly important, consumers look for more than that. And it took us some time to get it at Vitaline. We're still working to adapt our products to that. The second paradox is that people want innovation, but they do not want change. We want innovation to happen without effort. And changing our habits is effort. For example, we think it's why alternative meat, vegan meat, is a hot category. It helps people keep their habit while changing their consumption. For us, it was a big wake-up call, and we're still working to adapt our formats to the habit of our consumers. My third key learning is that food does not work like tech yet. It's very hard in the food industry to communicate innovation, product quality, nutritional performance. But we believe consumers are changing, that food is more and more driven by innovation. Hence, we believe that to develop innovation faster, we need to make development loops shorter. Pretty few people in the food industry has a background in tech, but we could learn a lot from their lean development. We have to remember that the great examples from Silicon Valley is not in the vast amount of money they spend in marketing. It's in the speed at which they bring innovation to market. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm so glad you stuck around to hear the last presentation of the day. It was all a bit of a crapshoot here. We didn't know who was going when, so I am grateful to see people still here. So I'm very thankful, and I'm really grateful to all the organizers at Seeds&Chips who allowed me to come and speak to you today, because I think I'm one of the few, I don't know, maybe only nutrition scientists here. I've had a long-standing interest in the future of food for, gosh, I don't know, 25 years or so, and I'm a pretty big sci-fi geek as well, so you're going to hear a couple of sci-fi references. In fact, I'm talking about food evolution, the final frontier. Specifically, how nutrition science, technology, and innovation really are the foundation of health and sustainability, people to planet. Before I start, I just want to mention that, like all of us here, we have a very small amount of time to talk to you about pretty huge subjects. My recent book, I cover a huge amount about the past, present, and future of food. What Everyone Needs to Know is a great series through Oxford University Press, and I'm just going to throw out a few of the things that I think about and then focus in on my subject today. How will we sustainably feed people? Not only in 2050, which a lot of us here are actively working about when we're going to be about 10 billion people, but beyond. And I'm talking about beyond, as in 24th century, centuries from now. What are we going to be eating? How will people procure and consume food? How are high tech and big data changing farming? You're going to be hearing that in other sessions today and tomorrow throughout the time. Will food production move to cities? We've been moving away from farming for centuries now. That trend is only going to continue, just as it's going on in lower and middle income countries today. That trend will continue. Will animals be raised as food? Is personalized nutrition hope or hype? What will be on our dinner plate? How will machines change how we cook and eat, from machine learning to artificial intelligence to robots in our kitchen? Tech is having a massive impact on how we eat, both how we prepare food and how we consume it. Ultimately, what does food evolution look like? So that's where I'm going to spend my time. But again, all of these are massively important to figuring out what the future of food will look like and creating a healthy and sustainable food supply. You know, the fact is, there's a lot of contention and no doubt in this conference as well. People feel very passionately about food. I know I do. I came at nutrition from being a foodie. I cooked, I baked, I gardened. Nutrition was a natural science for me because I knew I wanted a doctorate, and so therefore nutrition, which brings together health and food, was absolutely the right science for me. But many people feel very passionately what and how we eat is a very intimate relationship, and we often argue about what the best ways are to create a healthy and sustainable food supply. Well, one of the things that gets a short end of the stick, I have found, is science. In fact, that's why I left my career doing mostly research to change to science communication. If you haven't seen this before, it's a well-known cover from National Geographic. It's from a few years back. Climate change, evolution, the moon landing, vaccinations, genetically modified food. The amount of junk science and opinions out there that are confusing people and or changing the conversations or dominating the conversations is having a dramatic, a very problematic impact on the public health. We know that, of course, from vaccinations, and we know it also from the ongoing war against genetically engineered food, which I'm going to comment on a little bit later. I gotta tell you, as a nutrition scientist, I feel like I'm pretty much constantly under siege because people love to say, and I bet you guys will relate to it, why do nutritionists keep changing their minds? Sound familiar? Well, guess what? We're not really changing our minds. In fact, we know from decades of nutrition scientists, not just that single study that's hyped on your newsfeed maybe today, not from the opinion of your Facebook friend or your physical trainer, or your food activist who has a political agenda friend, or your physician quack who knows nothing about nutrition. I'm talking about the science. Nutrition is biochemistry, right? It's biochemistry. We have a lot of people talking about nutrition that shouldn't be, again, which is why I led my career into communication. Guess what? 80% of chronic diseases are preventable. 80%, according to the World Health Organization. That's not knowing nothing. And we know that lifestyle changes will lead to that 80%. Diet is the single largest contributing factor. Diet is the single largest contributing factor according to World Health Organization. That's not from one study. That's not from a handful of studies. That's from hundreds and thousands of studies over the course of decades. Of course, what we learn inches forward slowly. So the question is then, though, what is the best way, if we know that 80% of chronic diseases are preventable, and the best way to do that is through what? A plant-based diet. That's not opinion. That's consensus of scientists around the world. That's the consensus of the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. That's the consensus of scientists around the world. Okay, not just one person's opinion, not a random physician, not your personal trainer. That is scientific consensus. But the question is, how are we going to achieve that? If we know that a plant-based diet, that people need to reduce their meat intake, not just for their own health, but for sustainability, if we know this to be true, how are we going to do that? Do we say, okay, well, people need to eat more legumes. They need to be getting their protein from plants, not animals. Well, yes, they do. Is telling people going to lead them to change their diet? No. You've heard that throughout today. We know that taste, cost, convenience are the leading drivers of how and what we eat. You've heard from all my colleagues, and I couldn't agree more, that food should be enjoyed. Food is a celebration of tradition and culture, and I, as much as anyone, want people to enjoy their food. Simply telling them what to eat doesn't work. Not if it doesn't taste good. I'll say more about that in a moment. But in the meantime, what are our options if we want people to eat more plants? Well, we could tell them to eat more. We could educate them. Well, what about how we should grow this to be more sustainable? Maybe we should grow it inside, vertically, so we don't further dwindle to precious natural resources. What about genetically engineering those peas? Maybe they can deliver, say, vitamin A, or some other nutrient which we know many people around the world lack, like we do in other situations. What about if it delivers a vaccine? So there's many questions surrounding food today, how we might change behavior so that people can have the benefits of a plant-based diet. Because if they do, their risk of chronic disease is going to go down. We're going to go back to living longer like we were before the current generation. So of course the question here, how are we going to attain best that sustainable development goal of good health and well-being? So this is my favorite one. If you're opening the session today, I feel like I should throw that in there. Well, I think let's look to Yoda. A little more knowledge might light our way. So what do I mean by that? Well, if we look across the course of human evolution, we start from the Paleolithic era and we get to the present, we see how, over time, it is our relationship with land has always been changed with tools, technology, and science. Tools, technology, and science. Really, it's the opposite direction, though. Whether science informs technology and impacts how and what we eat. Obviously, this is an entire portion of my book, but in brief, in the Paleolithic era, we later discovered stones that greatly expanded our diet, and we started consuming more animals. We were actually original gatherers-scavengers, in case no one told you. We were not hunter-gatherers. It wasn't until we developed stools. We only ate dead animals. So then we moved forward past the Paleolithic era. We discovered fire, we developed tools, our dietary diversity increased. Then we move on through the Neolithic era, the new Stone Age. That's when the birth of agriculture, right? We started domesticating grains, later animals. We settled into civilizations. Look at all those tools we have for storing grain. We started trading. Grain was the first form of currency. Look at all those tools we have to store and to hoe grain, to all of that type of things. That was about 12,000 years ago. Fast forward. I'm just touching on 5 here. The Industrial Revolution, moving away from the land, moving into cities, because that's where people were going. They didn't want to be growing their own food. We needed food to be preserved. We needed to get food to people in wars. We needed to get food to people in cities who no longer were growing their own food, canning, preserving food. All of these changed indelibly during the Industrial Revolution. The next one's much more recent, the genetic revolution. What can we say about that? None of us would be here today talking about personalization, at least to the extent that all of us touched upon it a little bit, including I will as well, without the genetic revolution. It's through the mapping of the human genome that we can even think about personalization. So then let's finally end on the digital revolution. Bring together the themes of the conference, Seeds and Chips. The digital revolution has allowed us to make incredible strides with regards to our quantified self, with regards to how we can measure what we eat, how we can make changes to how we grow food, and eventually to how we prepare and consume food as well. We live in an information age. Through all of this time, especially more recent years, nutrition science and other sciences have been unraveling the mysteries of why what we eat matters. Okay, so that's why we know about all the essential nutrients. That's why we have the knowledge that we can fortify food and so forth. So what I want to do in the remaining time, now that I've sort of set the stage, is just give two examples. One is my obsession. I am absolutely obsessed with the alternative protein movement, which, by the way, is within the past 10 years. I've been talking about the future of food for more than 20 years, and the fact that this has just happened is just mind-boggling to me. And if you haven't had these products, you are missing out. And the biggest consumer of these products is omnivores. So just, should I clarify, when I was talking about plant-based, I'm talking about plant-based. I didn't say vegetarian, I didn't say vegan. We simply are talking about swapping out meat and including more vegetables because you're gonna get better health for your body and for our environment. The top two games in town, Beyond Meat and Impossible Burger. The bottom one is Mark Post's cell-based burger, which is created actually using muscle cells. I'm assuming people are familiar with these products. Clearly, I cannot get into them further, other than to say a couple of things. All of them are committed to sustainability, because we know that livestock is a major emitter of methane. Methane is a powerful greenhouse gas, right? Not to mention the amount of inefficiencies in raising livestock. And by the way, of course, I can't get into the fact that many people today are dependent upon livestock for health and nutrition. That's a challenge for the developing world. But right now, I can tell you for certain, and I know I'm not alone, the future is meatless. And I'll say more about that. And I'm talking about the 24th century future right now. I'm not talking about 2050. Simply, too many people need it. But the bottom line is, all of these companies are committed to sustainability. And I'll just make you a note, and you can look more into it. But those two players at the top, Beyond Meat and Impossible Burger, view it very different ways. They're both plant-based burgers, but Beyond Meat actually is a non-GMO product because it wants to reach those consumers. The Impossible Burger, most consumers don't even know about because it meets their taste profile, so guess what? They probably don't care, but it's made using a genetic engineering. They chose to get their soy hemoglobin, right, the heme responsible for the blood in their burger, as it were, from yeast that's been genetically engineered versus soy, because they specifically did not want to have to grow more soy. So it's a more sustainable option. So fascinating difference in how they view sustainability. The bottom line, science, tech plus innovation equals disruption. This has disrupted the meat industry like never before, so much so that players like Tyson, meat companies, are getting involved in the game. You can have your burger and eat it too. That's good news for consumer, because taste is the #1 driver. And may I say it again, delicious. The last example I want to give you is nutrification. Nutrification is the most effective way of delivering health benefits to populations. This is not opinion, this is a fact. Nutrification. Most people aren't familiar with the word. Just think about it as it sounds, adding nutrients to food. You've already heard examples of it. Salt was the first one, 1914, more than a century ago. That's actually an image from the salt company. And of course, we know that this has been a major factor, if not the only factor, by which we were able to achieve a decrease in intellectual disability due to iodine deficiency disorder. That's through iodization. That's a good example of nutrification. Nutrification can sometimes be used for less than stellar reasons. Your vitamin donuts aren't gonna help people, right? Just like a huge amount of fortified foods that have a health halo, that have a perceived health value, really are no more nutritious than their non-nutrified counterparts. So this is not what I'm talking about. But when it's used correctly, as it was for grain products, when it treated a number of different vitamin B deficiencies 100 years ago, and like it did 20 years ago with folate being fortified to decrease neural tube defects, these are incredible examples of nutrification that have led to massive improvements in public health because they don't require behavior change. That is harnessing the power of nutrition knowledge and working with food technology to create a healthier population. And to the extent that such things are sustainable, like the alt meat products, it also leads to a more sustainable planet. And a couple more examples just on nutrification, fortification. We were just talking about traditional. Now I'm talking about biofortification. Many people might recognize this as golden rice. Golden rice is a genetic engineering project formed by the International Humanitarian Rice Board. People immediately think it. They think Monsanto, and a number of people then start Monsanto evil. No, no, no. We're talking about the International Rice Board. This is founded by scientists who want to prevent vitamin A deficiency, which is one of the leading causes of death and blindness of children in the developing world. It's completely preventable. This could be a method by which vitamin A is delivered, just like other traditional methods. It's been caught up in the genetic modification, GMO wars for 20 years, which is to the detriment of the health of many children. Soylent, you don't want to eat it all, don't want to change your behavior at all. We have perfectly nutrified, to the extent that we have such knowledge, products. And Vitalan you heard about as well. That allows us to have our meal without actually eating it, or preparing it, or cooking it. This is actually just the most natural evolution of nutrification, right? So we were first just adding a single nutrient because we could get that and prevent deficiencies. Now we're basically creating whole meals that meet our nutrient needs. The problem, by the way, that I can't digress, and I could give a whole lecture on it, is that such knowledge is based upon reductionism. And you've heard a little bit of a theme now, that this only includes the nutrients we know about, that we know about. Nutrition evolves, right? So it's only through a whole, varied diet. That apple we're eating, we know about some of the good things in it, but we don't know about the dark matter in it. We don't know about the things leading to our health effect that we don't know about. We won't know about them for a long time. But guess what? Years and years, centuries now, we will have that knowledge, such that, yes, we will be able to order food from a food replicator. Any Trekkies out there? Please, if you are, at least give me a little shout out so I don't, thank you, so I don't feel like a total nerd. Yes, I'm a science geek in all ways. But there's such perfect analogies, I think. This already exists. No, we can't yet go to a food replicator and order tea, Earl Grey, hot. We still need to have the tea leaves and brew the water, and if you didn't get that reference, you can just Google it. But that was Jean-Luc Picard constantly just going, tea, Earl Grey hot, and there it would appear. But here's the Klingon drinking ale, some sort of meaty product. There it is. That product has been perfectly nutrified to meet human needs. There's no more chronic disease, no more nutrient deficiencies, no more even headaches, because food has been perfectly nutrified. This is centuries hence, so we know the answers, right? But also, the thing that's very interesting is, even at that time, centuries hence, we'll be able to personalize it. So it would be Klingon, what do I need? Jean-Luc Picard, what do I need? So this would be personalized nutrition that we can only do when we have all the answers. Well, no doubt, many here don't feel the same as I do. Still in the 24th century, there are arguments about what role technology should play in producing and consuming food. Here, Captain Jean-Luc Picard argues with his brother, who, as you can see, grows grapes. That wine is from 2267. He is a farmer, and they say, no, the wine from the replicator can't surely be as good as that from my farm. Who knows? Wherever you find yourself, though, when it comes to such decisions and to such values, we know that everyone here, all voices, all solutions, all tools, all technologies that we have in our box are needed to solve today's incredible challenges with regards to health and sustainability. And to that, I ask you all that we may all live long and prosper. Everyone around the world, not just here, not just in places we can afford it, but to places where they can't. May you all join me, and long live the revolution.